Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
All that. Anyways, it goes out of him up, and then
Okay. Okay. So 693 in your math book. So yesterday we learned about classifying triangles, right? And we classify them by their angles and their sides, right? So if we have a triangle, all the angles are less than 90 degrees. What do we call that kind of triangle? 693. But yesterday, if we had a triangle that had all three angles were less than 90 degrees, what do we call that kind of triangle? Acute, very good. And if we have an angle that is greater than 90 degrees, obtuse. And if it has a right angle, 693. It's a right triangle if it has a 90-degree angle in it. Yes. Yes. Okay. And then if we're talking about sides, if it has no congruent sides, what do we call it? I don't know. So if you turn to this page right here, 686, right? If it has no congruent sides, it's a scaling triangle. If it has two congruent sides, it's an isosceles triangle. And if it has three congruent sides, it's an equilateral. So you'll identify the angles, then the sides. So you could have an acute scalene or acute isosceles or acute equilateral, right? You can have any combination of those, but that's how you classify a triangle. Okay, so today we're talking about side and angle relationships of a triangle. Okay, so we're going to identify some more relationships. So Cedric wants to make a pennant like the one shown. The pennant is the shape of an isosceles triangle. Let's investigate the relationship between the lengths of sides and the measure of the angles in the isosceles triangle. Draw the triangle outline of the pennant in the space below. So I'm not a very good drawer, but we'll do it like that, okay? Pretty close. Label the vertices. So this is a vertice or point. Mathematicians like to use big words, okay? So these are the vertices, or if you want to call them the points. So the shortest side is AB. So this is the shortest side, so we're going to call this A, we're going to call this B. Okay, and then the only letter left is C. Okay. Sides can be named by their endpoints. So the side AB is this side. Side AC is this side, or side BC. You could also say side CB. You could do that. It doesn't have any specific order on how you name them or order them. Okay. So what is true about the sides of B and BC, BC and AC? Right? We have an isosceles triangle, so we know these two sides are equal, right? So we know that BC and AC are congruent or the same, or they're equal, okay? Okay, select the tool to measure the angle opposite side BC. So here's side BC, and they're curious about this angle right here. Okay, and then the angle opposite AC. So here's AC. So they're interested in this angle right here. Well, the way you do that is with a protractor, but your protractor would only be good as your drawing is, okay? But what we would find if we had a really good drawing, we would find that the angles opposite, let me move this up. Opposite the congruent sides are congruent. So what they're saying is this side AC and side BC are congruent. They're the exact same side. So the angle opposite this congruent side is equal to this angle. So you have a congruent side. The opposing angle is going to be the same as this angle. Okay. So you can have congruent angles. You can have congruent sides. Okay, turn the page. Okay, so at the top of the page, it says relationships of sides and angles of isosceles triangles. In an isosceles triangle, the angles opposite the two congruent sides are congruent. Okay, so in this drawing right here, right, we know this is congruent and this is congruent. And we know that this angle is equal to this angle. Okay, so now let's look at an example. It says write and solve equations to determine the values of x and y in the figure. So let's look at our figure. Okay, so looking at our figure, we know that this is congruent. These two sides are equal. We know we have an isosceles triangle. We also know that congruent angles are equal to the congruent side. So if this angle is 35 degrees, this angle is 35 degrees. Okay? And we notice by our drawing that this side is 6.8 centimeters. So we know that this side is 6.8 centimeters. Okay? So determine the value of x, right? So that's over here in this angle. It says this angle is 7x. So we can write an expression, right? An equation. We know this is equal to 35. We can say 35 is equal to 7x. So now using algebra, we want to isolate the x so we can find the value of x, right? So to get x by itself, we know multiplication is going on there. We're going to do the opposite operation of division. So we're going to divide this by 7. And when we do that, right, these cancel out, right? Because 7 goes into 7 once. And 1 times x is x, so you get x by itself. But since you have this equal sign, whatever you do to the right side, you have to do the left side, right? Because you have to keep it balanced. So we're going to divide this side by 7. And 7 goes into 35 5 times. So we know the value of x right here is 5. Okay, so now it says determine the value of y. So let's look up here. So y minus 1.7, right, is equal. We know it's congruent side, so this is 6.8. So I have my mathematical y minus 1.7 is equal to 6.8. I want to get y by itself. So it's minus here. I'm going to add a 1.7 to that. These two cancel out. I get y by itself. And then whatever I do the left side, I have to do the right side because of the equal sign. If I didn't do that, the equal sign wouldn't have any validity. It wouldn't work. So I'm going to add 1.7 to this side. And 6.8 plus 1.7 is 8.5. So I know the value of y is 8.5. Okay, so we're using the properties of a triangle, right, to define the solution for x and y. But the only way we can do that is if we know what the properties of the triangle is, so we can use it to our advantage. Okay, so the bottom of the page, it says write and solve equations to determine the values of x and y in the figure. Okay, so let's look at our figure. Let's see what it's telling us. So we know this is congruent and this is congruent. So we know we have an isosceles triangle, right? And since we know the angle opposite a congruent side is the same as the other angle, we know this angle is 72 degrees, right? So this is the same, this is the same. This is 72 degrees, that's 72 degrees. Okay, we know this side is 4 3/4 feet, so we know this side is 4 3/4 feet because it's congruent. Okay, so now we want to solve for x. So to solve for x, right, we're going to write an expression. We know that 12x is equal to 72. Now let's figure out how we're going to get y. So y is y plus 2/3 is equal to 4 3/4. Okay, so we have our expressions. Now we just have to solve for x and solve for y. Okay, so once you take 2 minutes, see if you can find the value of x and find the value of y, and we'll go from there. Okay, hey Google, set a timer for 2 minutes.
Sure, 2 minutes, starting now.
Okay, if you're stuck, just look up here. This will help you. This is a little different because it's fractions. Okay, so you got to know your rules on adding and subtracting fractions. Hint, 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 you cannot add or subtract a mixed mixed number. And you have to have a common denominator. Hey Google, stop. Okay, so let's look at the first one. We have x, right? So we have 12x. We want to get x by itself, right? We have multiplication going on here. So we're going to do the opposite of multiplication. So we're going to divide this side by 12, right? These cancel out. That leaves x over here. Well, whatever I do to the left, I have to do to the right. So I'm going to divide this by 12. So 72 divided by 12 is 6. So I know the value of x is 6. Okay? So now let's look at this. This is going to get a little bit more involved if we're doing fractions. Okay? But the theory works the same. Instead of multiplication here, we're doing addition. So y plus 2/3, well, the opposite of addition is subtraction. So I'm going to subtract 2/3, right? This cancels out. This leaves me y over here. So now I have to do this. I have to do the same thing to the right side. So I have 4 3/4 minus 2/3. Okay, well, I have a mixed number right here. I can't add and subtract a mixed number, so I got to change this into an improper fraction. So 4 times 4 is 16. 16 plus 3, 16, 17, 18, 19. That makes this 19/4 minus 2/3, right? But when I add or subtract fractions, I have to have a common denominator, right? So I've got to come up with a common denominator. Okay, well, let's just do 12. That's easy enough. So let me rewrite this. X is going to equal to 19/4, and I'm going to multiply it by 3/3 because that's 1, right? I'm not changing the value of this. It's still an equivalent fraction, right? 4 times 3 gives me 12. 19 times 3 gives me 57. Right? Minus, now I have 2/3, but I need to get a denominator of 12 here. So I'm going to multiply, yeah. So I'm going to multiply this by 4/4, which is 1. Create another equivalent fraction. 4 times 2 is 8, and 4 times 3 is 12. So now I have 57/12 minus 8/12. Now I can do that. I have a common denominator. 57 minus 8 is 65. 65/12. Okay, and if I look at my n numbers, I know they're not divisible. I mean, they don't have the same rule. I can't simplify this anymore. So I'm going to just change it into a mixed number. 12 goes into 65. 6 times 5, no, 12 times 5 is 60, right? So this is, so the big number out front becomes a 5, and the remainder that I have left over is 5. So that's 5/12. So there's a lot of math going on in there. Okay, but that's due to the fractions, and they gave us different fractions. Okay. Okay, let's move on to the next page. Now we're talking about relationships of sides and angles of equilateral triangles. So over here, we're talking about isosceles triangles. Here, we're talking about equilateral triangles. In an equilateral triangle, all 3 angles are congruent and each measures 60 degrees. Okay? And if you remember, right, we know that the sum of all the angles in a triangle equals 180 degrees. So if these are congruent, right? How do they? So you can do that by, if you take angle 1 plus angle 2 plus angle 3 equals 180, right? Well, 3 into 180 goes 60. So you know the value of each one of these angles is 60 degrees, right? So this is congruent with this, which is this, and you know this side is equal to that side is equal to that side. An equilateral triangle can also be called an equiangular triangle since it has 3 congruent angles. Let x represent the measure. This is how they just calculated the 60 degrees. So x plus x plus x is 180, so x is 60. So an equilateral triangle is also an equiangular triangle. Okay? So let's look at 2. Write and solve equations to determine the values of x and y in the figure. So here we're just taking an equilateral triangle, doing the same thing we did over here. Determine the value of x since, see how they have this little symbol, this little triangle, WVZ. So they go WVZ. That's how they get the name of this. Is equilateral. It is also equiangular. So my formula is, right, here's 4x. We know that angle is equal to 60. So 4x is equal to 60. So that's multiplication there. I'm going to do the opposite of that, which is division. Divide it by 4. This 4 cancels out, leaves me with x, but I have to do it to the other side. So 60 divided by 4 is 15. So x is equal to 15. Determine the value of y. So here, this side is 6.1y. Okay, but I also know this side is also equal to 25.62. This side is also equal to 25.62. So my formula is 6.1y is equal to 25.62. Well, that's multiplication. They don't have an operation sign there. And when you don't have one, you just assume that's multiplication. Okay, so the opposite of multiplication is division. Jacob, you looking at your book? Jacob, book? You looking at your book? Jacob,
Jacob?
you looking at your book? You looking at, okay, okay. Well, I'm just curious. I was just checking. Okay. So I'm going to take this side, divide by 6.1. When I do that, these cancel out because 6.1 goes into 6.1 one time, right? Well, I have to do the same thing to the right side. So I'm going to divide 25.62 by 6.1, and that comes out to y is equal to 4.2. Okay. This, what you're doing here, is what's called algebra. This is what you'll get more into next year and get even more, it gets more and more involved. But this is the basics of algebra. Okay, and this, what you're learning about the angles, that is geometry, which you'll get more into in 8th grade. Okay. Okay, so here at the bottom we have a triangle, right? And if we notice, let's see what we know. We know this side's equal to that side, equal to this side. So we know it's an equilateral triangle. It's an equal angular triangle. Okay, so we're going to solve for x. So where's x? X is this angle right here. Well, since it's an equal angular triangle, we know this has a value of 60 degrees. So we know that 1.6x is equal to 60. And our formula for y, where's y? Y, here you go. We know that this side also is equal to 3 1/3. So our formula for y is y plus 1.5 is equal to 3 1/3. Okay. So once you see if you can find the value of x and y. Hey, Google, set a timer for 2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes. Starting now.
Hey, Google, stop. Okay, so here we have x. This is our equation, 1.6x equals 60. We have multiplication going on there. The opposite of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide this by 6. This cancels out. This leaves me with x. I have to do the same thing to the other side. So 60 divided by 1.6, and that comes to 37.5. That's what you should have gotten. Okay, so let's look at this. This is going to be involved. We're doing fractions. We have mixed denominators. So we have y plus 1.5 is equal to 3 1/3. So I want to get y by itself. So I'm going to subtract 1.5. That cancels these out. That brings y down here. I have to do the same thing to the other side. So it's 3 1/3 minus 1.5. Okay, I have two mixed numbers. I can't do anything with mixed numbers. I have to change them to improper fractions. So I'm going to change this. 3 times 3 is 9 plus 1 is 10. That's 10 thirds minus, you have to change this to a mixed number. 2 times 1 is 2 plus 1 is 3. That's 3 halves. Okay, I have to have a common denominator for me to subtract them. Right? So let's just do 6. That's simple enough. So let me rewrite this. Y is equal to 10 thirds. I'm going to multiply this by 2 over 2. Okay, I haven't changed the value. I'm just creating an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 6. Right? And when I do that, 10 times 2 is 20. 3 times 2 is 6. So the equivalent, this is an equivalent fraction. 26 is equivalent to 10 thirds minus 3 halves, and I'm going to multiply that by 3 over 3. Same thing. I'm going to create an equivalent fraction. 3 times 3 is 9, and 2 times 3 is 6. So now I have 26 minus 9, 6. So 20 minus 9 is 11. So I have 11 sixths. This is an odd number. This is an even number. I can't simplify it anymore. So I'm going to just change it to a mixed number. 6 goes into 11 once. So that's my big number out front. And what do I have left over? I have 5 left over, right? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So that is 1 5/6. So y is equal to 1 5/6. Okay? Okay. Yeah. Okay. This is the top of page 696. Some traffic signs, like the yield signs shown, are in the shape of an equilateral triangle. Write and solve an equation to determine the value of x. Okay. In an equilateral triangle, each angle measure is 60 degrees. Okay. So we know this has a value of 60 degrees. So our equation is 2/3 x is equal to 60. So if I have 2/3, that's multiplication. I'm going to divide it by 2/3. This cancels out, leaves me with x. Then I have to divide 60 by 2/3. And when I do that, I get 90. So x is equal to 90. Okay. Write and solve equations to determine the values of x and y in the figure. Okay. So let's see what we got. Well, we got a congruent side, a congruent side. We have an isosceles triangle here. Okay. We know that the angles opposite the congruent side are also equal. So we know this angle is 68 degrees. Okay. So what's our formula to find x? How could I write an equation to find x? It's for this angle right here. Well, it would be 4x is equal to 68, right? Because we know it has a value of 68. So I can just do that and solve for x. what about y? Well, I know this side is 7 and 5/6, so this side is 7 and 5/6. So I can just say, I can say y plus 1/2 is equal to 7 and 5/6. Okay? So once you take 2 minutes, see if you can find the value of x and y. Just like we've been doing all along here. Hey Google, set a timer for 2 minutes.
Sure, 2 minutes. Starting now.
Yeah.
I finished my
Okay. Let's put you down for that. 6.
I didn't do this.
Multiplication table. Half minute. Half minute. Yeah, okay. And that is generation genius. G. You do that, that's okay, and that's science. I'll put that down for science. Very good. Thank you, man. I got you. You're covered. Zoe, generation G. Hey, Google, stop. Okay. So my equation to find x is 4x is equal to 68. I've got multiplication going on there. I'm going to divide this to get rid of the 4. These cancel out, leaves me with x. I divide 68 by 4, and I get 17. Okay, now I have y. So I have y plus 1/2 is equal to 756. So to make that go away, I have to subtract it. So this is y minus 1/2. These two cancel out. This leaves me y. So, but I have to do that to the other side. So I have 7 and 5/6 minus 1/2. Okay. So now I have a mixed number that I can't do anything with. I had to change it to an improper fraction. So 6 times 7 is 42. 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47. So y is equal to 47 sixths minus 1/2. Okay, well, I have to have a common denominator. So I'm going to have to change this with a denominator 6. So I'm going to multiply this by 3/3. I'm going to create an equivalent fraction, right? 3 times 1 is 3. 3 times 2 is 6. So now I have 3/6. So now it's 47 6 minus 3/6. And I get 44 6. Let me drop it down here. So y is equal to 44 6. Okay. Okay. Well, I can't simplify. Well, yeah, I could. That's 22 times 2 and this is 2 times 3. That cancels out. That gives me 22 thirds, right? This is odd. This is, I don't have anything else in common here. The only factor there is 11. That's 3. It doesn't work. So I'm going to change this into a mixed number. So 3 goes into 22 7 times. That's 21 with 1 left over. So it's 7 1/3. So y is equal to 7 1/3. Okay. So real quick, tomorrow we're going to do the really short chapter, triangle inequalities. Okay. So we're just going to talk about the sides and the relationship of the sides. So basically that rule is the sum of lengths of any 2 sides of a triangle must be greater than the length of the third. So we'll learn about that. Then I will set you up for the quiz, and that will be tomorrow. It's a very short chapter. Okay. That is all I have. Wipe down your tables and you may go. Okay, my online people, you may log off, go to period 7. I'm going to end the call.